Action. Session 11. Oops. There we go. Alrighty, session 11, skill acquisition. This one's probably not as fun as the last one, but
No shoes are gonna go.
this training program is based on the Registered Behavior Technician task list and is designed to meet the 40-hour training requirement for the RBT credential. The program is offered independent of BAC by Tina Patterson. 2 types of behavior. There is respondent behavior, which is unlearned. This is, when I was learning this, it's respondent like a reflex. So you have sneezes, coughs, blinking. You hit your knee, your reflex on your knee, your behavior, everything is a behavior, right? So this is your respondent behavior. My leg's gonna go up if I hit that bone on my knee. So, hallucinations, visual hallucinations, it's respondent, it's unlearned. Nobody taught you how to hallucinate. Ooh.
What is that supposed
That's
to
a
be?
hallucination.
Oh.
The other one is operant behavior, which is learned. And this is Skinner, this is where Skinner comes in. Operant behavior. Taught the pigeons to peck a certain color so that they could get the food. It's operant, it's learned. So it has a previous learning history.
You know.
So you learn to brush your teeth, you learn how to eat, you learn how to talk, you learn how to, everything you do that's not just a natural reflex is learned. It's an operant behavior. Reinforcement. Okay. Follows a response. It may be provided, which is positive because it's added, or removed, which is negative. And it increases or maintains responses, or reinforcement.
We are now going to discuss the procedures that increase or enhance behavior. These are positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is the most popular and most chosen principle of behavior change. Some claim that positive reinforcement is the basic building block of human behavior. People are likely to repeat behavior if it produces reinforcement. They are less likely to repeat behavior that does not produce reinforcement. Overall, people who receive more reinforcement than punishment seem to be happier and more balanced. Positive reinforcement is a procedure for behavior change in which a behavior is followed by the addition of a reinforcer, which results in increased behavior. Positive reinforcement can be used to increase a wide range of behaviors. It can be used to produce new behaviors, to replace less desirable behaviors, and it can refine the topography, frequency, or duration of existing behavior. A reinforcer is an event that follows a behavior and increases the rate of that behavior. Reinforcers can be verbal, social, edible, or tangible. They can be delivered in the form of activities, privileges, or as generalized reinforcers such as tokens, points, or money. Reinforcement can be delivered by others, such as mom giving her child a hug after the child gave her a beautiful picture. Or reinforcement can be delivered by oneself, such as treating yourself to your favorite candy bar after acing a test. Reinforcement can also be delivered by your environment or nature, such as seeing a deer in a meadow during an early morning walk. All of these are examples of reinforcers if they increase the rate of the behavior. Last time Christy went to the beach, she got a really bad sunburn that hurt for days. Christy went to the beach again 2 weeks later and decided this time to wear sunscreen. Christy did not get a sunburn. Now Christy always wears sunscreen at the beach. What behavior changed? Yes, putting sunscreen on at the beach. Did it increase or decrease? It increased. So we know the behavior change procedure was reinforcement. Was something added or taken away? Yes, the sunburn was taken away. Christy was able to avoid a sunburn by putting on sunscreen. This is an example of negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is often confused with punishment. It's the removal of an aversive stimulus that increases the rate of a future behavior. Negative reinforcement is the reduction or termination of an ongoing stimulus that results in the likelihood of the behavior occurring again. When behavior is increased by negative reinforcement, the person is performing the behavior to escape or avoid an aversive stimulus. For example, Jessie drove over the speed limit one day and got a speeding ticket. Jessie started driving the speed limit from then on. First, Jessie's speeding was punished. Then, his driving the speed limit is negatively reinforced by avoiding future speeding tickets. Let's see if we can identify what type of reinforcement is being used in the following examples. Remember to ask yourself, what behavior changed? Did the behavior increase or decrease? After the behavior occurred, was something added or taken away? Dan is sleeping. His alarm goes off. Dan is too tired to get up, so he avoids waking up by pushing snooze. Now Dan pushes snooze every time the alarm goes off. What behavior increased? Pushing snooze. Was something added or taken away? The alarm sound was taken away. This is another example of negative reinforcement. Jane loves to receive mail. Jane checked the mailbox one day and got 2 letters. After that, Jane checked the mailbox every day. What behavior changed? Checking the mailbox. Did it increase or decrease? It increased. Was something added or removed? The letters were added. This is an example of what principle of behavior? Positive reinforcement. Jason was goofing off with his friends during math class. Mrs. Robbins told him to sit in the back of the class away from his friends. Jason went to the back of the class and just so happened to sit next to Jennifer, who he has had a crush on since 1st grade. Jason started goofing off in class more often after that, hoping to be sent to the back of the class again. What behavior increased? Goofing off or bugging his neighbors. Was something added or taken away? Attention and the ability to sit next to Jennifer was added. Although this was unintentional, the teacher used positive reinforcement. Pam couldn't study with the TV on, but her roommate always had it on during the time Pam would study. One day, Pam shut the door and she was able to study better. Now Pam shuts the door every time she studies. What behavior increased? Shutting the door when she studies. Was something added or taken away? The noise from the TV was taken away. This is an example of what principle of behavior? Negative reinforcement.
If you're getting rid of something that they don't want, then you know it's negative.
Oh.
Okay.
Stuck in the corner.
Contingencies of reinforcement. Unconditioned reinforcement. It is the primary reinforcement. So it's like the number one thing, right? It's not associated with other reinforcers. It's food, clothing, shelter, water,
Like day-to-day things.
The bottom of Maslow's triangle.
actually, and then sex and drugs are counted as primary reinforcement. So like caffeine, ibuprofen, Coke, cocaine.
I was going to say a cola.
They both are. Coca-Cola and cocaine are both, because those are caffeine.
Why are those unconditioned? Because
They are
produce like an automatic response, like
so-
a physiological response.
your food, clothing, shelter. Those are your primaries. That's what your body needs.
Along with sex and drugs.
That's why drugs are so addictive, because it goes along with your chemicals in your body. And so does sex. It releases all the natural chemicals.
Oxytocin.
That's why you can get divorced if your spouse is not having sex with you. Just FYI. Just everybody wanted to know.
Note to self.
Because it's a primary reinforcer. Conditioned
never did that.
reinforcement. Stimulus strengthens behavior. The stimulus is associated with the primary reinforcer, but it's a learned association. So you really only need water, right? But our soda can be a conditioned reinforcer, because we know that it will give us a little bit of
Drugs.
drugs. And your so it's going to heighten the chemicals in your brain, and then it's going to give you a sugar boost, and it's going to make you a little less thirsty. It's not going to help as much as water, but it
makes it
gets
worse.
paired with those unconditioned reinforcers, but you are
Tea
learned
and
that
Well,
you
I like the reading.
people like water. Some people like soda more than water, whatever.
Conditioned reinforcement occurs when a stimulus reinforces or strengthens set behaviors through its association with a primary reinforcer. But what does that all mean? Millie is a first grade teacher who is well known for her delicious treats that she likes to bake for her students. Throughout the week, Millie watches her students closely. Whenever she spots a student who is on task, following the rules, or exceeding some set classroom expectation, she hands the student a red token. At the end of the week, the students turn in their tokens to receive one of Millie's treats. As the school year progresses, Millie's students work harder and harder to get their red tokens, knowing that they can expect a treat at the end of the week. This is an example of conditioned reinforcement. Millie used the red tokens to reinforce positive student behaviors. She was able to do this by pairing the tokens with food, which is a primary reinforcer.
Pair our tokens on our kids' token boards, then we are using a conditioned reinforcer. At first they don't understand what those tokens are or mean, But then, after they earned it, that's why with the rate of reinforcement it has to be pretty quick when they're learning how to do the token boards. Just like a couple, like 5 seconds, and then, oh look, you got your smiley faces. It has to be pretty quick. Turn all these off.
Yay.
So it has to be pretty quick. Just trying to close all these. Okay.
I like your footstool.
Continuous schedule of reinforcement. So the desired behavior is reinforced every time it occurs. So a continuous is every single time. That's what you start with. Every single time they walk in the hallway appropriately, they get reinforced with a brown dragon. And then we'll have to fade it out.
Oh god.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Desired behavior is learned quickly. You're reinforcing every single time. It did not take her long. Maybe 2 times in the beginning. Did she miss it? Maybe. After that, it was every single time she transitioned, she walked appropriately. Learn it pretty quick. If you earn $5 every time you buy a $1 lottery ticket, you are going to buy a $1 lottery ticket every single time.
I mean, I'm going to spend my whole paycheck.
Right, because then you're going to triple or quintuple, whatever that
Yeah,
is.
I'm going to spend my whole paycheck on that dollar lottery ticket.
Right.
No.
If I'm getting $5
If you win,
every
if you are
time.
guaranteed to win $5 every single time,
I was confused about that statement. I didn't
She's like,
understand
no.
why you. Okay.
yeah, because every single
Yeah.
time. It's
No.
continuous.
No, I
every
mean, I
time.
get. Yeah.
And it's sensitive to extinction. So, if we stop doing that, the behavior is going to extinguish pretty quickly. So, her behavior of throwing herself on the floor extinguished. It's gone. Intermittent schedule of reinforcement is the desired behavior is reinforced only part of the time. So maybe every other time we'll reinforce her. Maybe every time she goes to ESAP. Because I think that is, in the beginning, that was where a lot of the triggers were. Her demands are probably, it's a different environment over there. So there's more kids, there's more teachers, there's more different expectations. It's more stimulating. So maybe every time she goes to ESAP, she can have the box, but on this side you can't. Desired behavior is resistant to extinction. Learned behavior takes longer to acquire.
Have you ever played a slot machine? Why do you keep putting money in over and over again? You aren't rewarded with each play. However, you are more likely to keep putting money in the machine if you win every now and then. Slot machine manufacturers are well aware of the reinforcing power of a win, even if it's small and ever so often. They use a type of reinforcement schedule in order to encourage gamblers to continue playing even if they are not reinforced with each pull of the machine. Reinforcement is defined as a consequence that follows a response that increases or attempts to increase the likelihood of that response occurring in the future. In this lesson, we will focus on the schedules of reinforcement. When and how a consequence is reinforced is critical to the learning process and the likelihood of increasing a response. A schedule of reinforcement acts as a rule, stating which instances of a behavior will be reinforced. Sometimes an instance will be reinforced every time they occur. In other cases, reinforcement might only happen sporadically or through scheduled occurrences. There are 2 types of reinforcement schedules, continuous and partial. Certain types of schedules may be more effective depending on the situation and the training purpose. In a continuous reinforcement schedule, the desired behavior is reinforced each and every time it occurs. This continuous schedule is used during the first stages of learning in order to create a strong association between the behavior and the response. Over time, if the association is strong, the reinforcement schedule is switched to a partial reinforcement schedule. In the classroom, Teachers will observe rapid improvements in students' behavior if they reinforce desired responses whenever they observe them. For example, if a teacher observes a student diligently working on an assignment while other students are moving noisily about, that teacher should reinforce the apt student with praise in order to encourage the positive behavior to continue. The teacher should then continue to reinforce this behavior every time it occurs in order to attach a strong relationship between the positive behavior and the reinforcement. The advantage to continuous reinforcement is that the desired behavior is typically learned quickly. However, this type of reinforcement is difficult to maintain over a long period of time due to the effort of having to reinforce a behavior each time it is performed. Also, this type of reinforcement is quick to be extinguished. Extinction is the gradual disappearance of an acquired response, resulting from repeated lack of reinforcement for the response. Simply put, once the reinforcement stops, the behavior will too. In a partial reinforcement schedule, the response is reinforced only part of the time. This may also be referred to as an intermittent reinforcement schedule. The advantage here with a partial reinforcement schedule is it's more resistant to extinction. The disadvantage is that the learned behaviors take longer to be acquired. There are 4 types of partial reinforcement schedules: fixed ratio, variable ratio, fixed interval, and variable.
Fixed interval, variable interval. Look at that, I was ahead of myself. So the one that we want to use the most is, which one?
Depends.
It does depend, but which one's
Like-
most
Variable.
variable? Yes, variable for sure. Variable ratio is the
Well, that's like the
Best.
goal, right? Like
Yes.
it's like,
yep.
but if they're not cooperating.
So you start at a fixed, and then here you slowly move to a variable. Oh, good. They clarify. Fixed ratio is a fixed number of responses. Variable ratio, unpredictable number of responses. The fixed interval is the fixed amount of time. And variable interval is an unpredictable amount of time. Now, I'm going to show this video because I don't think it studied this study thing. Let me see. Oh, it's a pausing thing. Oh no. Pause. Hold on. I don't think it's a study. I think it's like a YouTube.
The term fixed ratio schedule of reinforcement refers to a schedule of reinforcement that relies on the principles of operant conditioning. You probably remember that in psychology, operant conditioning is a type of associative learning in which a person's behavior changes according to that behavior's consequences. Fixed ratio schedules of reinforcement are but one of 4 traditional ways in which this type of associative learning occurs. So, we know that it has to do with operant conditioning, but how do fixed ratio schedules of reinforcement work? Let's look a little closer at the words that comprise the concept. What does fixed mean? When it comes to operant conditioning, fixed means that a behavior is being reinforced on a consistent schedule. In this context, schedule refers to how often the reinforcement is provided. Reinforcement is kind of like earning a reward for doing something. If a certain behavior is exhibited, then a reinforcer is presented. The concept of reinforcement says that the reinforcer should provide motivation for the behavior to be repeated. So, a fixed schedule means that the reinforcement is made available every time a specific behavior takes place, or it can mean it is presented every 5th time, 25th time, 30th time, etc. The type of schedule is not what matters. What matters is that the schedule must remain constant. If the reinforcement is introduced randomly or inconsistently, then the schedule is not fixed. It is a completely different schedule of reinforcement altogether. Okay, so what about that other word, ratio? What does that mean?
It means the number of times their behavior is emitted. Right, I brought my definitions right because it's been a while since I've had my vocabulary. Hold on. certain number of responses, ratio schedules. Yes. Ratio delivered following a given number of responses is a ratio schedule. Okay. We on scenario 1? Okay, yes. Okay. Identify the schedule of reinforcement. All right, we have Starbucks rewards. Do some practice. Okay. So, if we go to, anybody know, I always go to Starbucks to get rewards.
I know Starbucks, but I don't really have the rewards.
You don't have the app? Okay, no. So basically you get a certain number of points for every dollar you spend. So you have a certain amount of points for every dollar, and then once you get to 125 points, you get a free beverage, however much you want. Doesn't matter, it can be an $8 drink, it's free. So, is it fixed or is it variable?
Fixed.
It is fixed. Is it interval or a ratio?
Ratio.
Good. Fixed ratio schedule. So when points and rewards are given following every purchase at Starbucks, it is a fixed ratio schedule. Scenario 2. Pop quizzes. So we have to think.
Variable.
It's a variable because they're surprise.
An interval.
Good. Because it is on a time.
What time?
Variable interval. Scenario 3. Your grades at school. They are provided at the end of the course. So
Fixed.
at the end, it's a fixed because it's at the end of the quarter.
An interval.
Good. You have to catch up from scenario 4.
Adam.
Lottery tickets. Are they fixed or variable? So when a person purchases a lottery ticket and waits to see if that number is selected to win, what type of reinforcement? Is it fixed or variable?
Variable.
Variable. And is it interval or ratio?
Interval.
Ratio.
Because it's being called out at a certain time, right?
Or is it?
It should be ratio.
It's not the time that it's.
It's a
Being called out.
variable.
It's
The
if you
action of-
win.
It's
Yeah.
the,
Okay, okay.
It's a variable ratio.
Variable ratio. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Pop quizzes.
Variable ratio.
Wait, what do I?
Scenario 4.
Oh.
4.
Okay.
Starbucks was
Yeah.
Starbucks was a fixed ratio.
Right.
I don't remember the rest. I just remember scenario
the
1
rest.
with Starbucks.
Fixed ratio.
Starbucks. Yes.
Hey, I worked there while I was trying to finish my master's.
Did you?
Stupid company. They fired me because Jack and I had the flu for a week and I couldn't find coverage.
They,
Aw.
My first job I got fired at was Starbucks.
it led you. It's all part of the journey,
I had fun. I really loved that job.
and
I actually this is non-related. I just unfriended everybody on Facebook that I used to work with there the other day. I'm like, why am I still friends with these people? I don't care about them.
I don't care.
I really don't. Unfriend. I don't care. Discrete trial teaching, DTT. So we use this and then one other kind of skill acquisition procedures pretty much here. So you have your SD or your request. Remember, you're going to put your 3 pictures out, then you're going to give them one other picture, and you're going to say match. That's your SD. That was the direction. It's the thing that happens before their response. Then you have your prompt or waiting for your response. You have to give them some wait time to process. And then if they make the incorrect, then you give them the correct answer, or if they are seriously like they're waiting too long, let's get this, on the road. We're not waiting here for you to decide all morning. And then they have the response and then a reinforcement for correction.
The first video in the series will provide you with an overview of one of the basic tools used in intensive behavioral interventions, the discrete trial. The discrete trial is made up of several distinct components.
Nice sitting. Good girl.
It begins with the SD, or discriminative stimulus.
Do this. Oh,
This is the instruction given by the therapist to the child. Next, the therapist either waits for the child to respond or provides some help in the form of a prompt if needed. Finally, once the child has responded, the child is given reinforcement, a reward for a correct response, or a correction for an incorrect response.
Yep. Let's try it again. Do this. All right, good trying. I like how hard you're working.
You have just witnessed one discrete trial. After a brief pause, the therapist then begins another complete discrete trial. A discrete trial is made up of the following 3 components: an SD in the form of an instruction by the therapist to the child, a response from the child or a prompt from the therapist, and finally, reinforcement or correction if necessary from the therapist. Let's now examine each of these 3 components in detail, starting with the SD. Though generally an oral instruction, an SD can also be nonverbal, such as a picture, a toy like Mr. Potato Head placed on a table, or the sight of a swing.
You are super.
A good SD must follow several guidelines in order to be effective. First, all SDs should be clear and consistent. They should be free of extraneous information. And finally, they should be delivered in a voice slightly louder than a normal speaking tone. Now we will demonstrate what a good SD looks and sounds like.
Do this.
Way to go! Wonderful! Touch half. Oh, whoa! Oh, that sounds so neat!
Doing match.
Whoa!
Now we will demonstrate what a poor SD looks and sounds like.
Touch my nose. Whoa! Put one up for me! Where's my nose? That's right! Wow! Find my nose. Oh, that's super, Corey!
We will play the good SD once again. Take note that the therapist speaks clearly and consistently, uses a short, concise instruction without extraneous information, and speaks slightly louder than he or she normally would.
Do this.
Way to go! Wonderful! Touch half. Oh, whoa! Oh, that sounds so neat! Do this. Good girl! Do this.
Do this.
Marvelous! Do this.
Do this.
That's right, Corey! Do this.
Do this.
Wonderful! Do this.
Do this.
Amazing!
Now that we have covered the basics of delivering a good SD, we will move on to the next step in discrete trials, prompting or waiting for a response. When first beginning to teach a new task, the therapist should immediately prompt after giving the SD.
1.
A prompt is some form of assistance to help ensure that the child responds correctly. This teaches the child how he or she should respond to the SD. Indeed, any time a therapist is not certain that the child is capable of responding correctly to an SD independently, the therapist should prompt immediately. The next step is the gradual removal of the prompt. This occurs once the therapist believes the skill being taught has been learned, and once he or she is sure that the prompt is no longer needed. When removing a prompt, the therapist must be careful to avoid inadvertently giving a delayed prompt. This situation can occur when the therapist thinks the child knows the correct response.
What does this say?
The therapist gives an SD, pauses and waits for the child to respond, realizes that the child is not going to respond or is responding incorrectly, and jumps in with a prompt. The therapist must decide before delivering an SD whether or not to prompt, and if so, to deliver the prompt immediately after the SD. We will now move on to the third and final component of a discrete trial, reinforcement or correction. Once an SD has been given, the child responds in one of two ways. Either the child responds correctly and reinforcement is delivered, or the child responds incorrectly and a corrective procedure is applied. We will begin with reinforcement, which is sometimes called a reward. When providing reinforcement to a child, there are several key points to keep in mind in order to maximize its effectiveness. First, reinforcement must immediately follow a correct response. Reinforcement is given whether the child responds independently or with the help of a prompt. The second principle of reinforcement is that it should be enthusiastic and involved. If you are excited and enthusiastic when delivering the reward, the child will enjoy the reinforcement more, and that will lead to better learning. Lastly, reinforcement should be varied. If the same stale rewards are used all the time, they will lose their effectiveness. Remember, effective reinforcement is best achieved if given immediately after a correct response by the child, given in an enthusiastic and involved manner, and if the reward is varied. There is one eventuality that we have not yet covered. What happens if the therapist delivers an SD and the child gives an incorrect response? There are two general approaches to dealing with incorrect responses. One which uses an informational no, and one which does not. The traditional approach is to use an informational no. When the child gives the incorrect response, instead of giving a reward, the therapist responds by saying no in a neutral tone of voice.
Where does Grandma work?
He works in the house.
No. Where does Grandma work? Say library.
Library.
Boink! Yay!
Let's watch that again. The no is not meant to be aversive or punishing. It is simply meant to provide the neutral information that the response was incorrect and will not be rewarded.
Where does Grandma work?
He works in the house.
No. Where does Grandma work? Say library.
Library.
Boink! Yay! Now you get Starburst!
The therapist then goes on to give the same SD again, but on that next trial, the therapist prompts the child to ensure that the child gets the response correct. Another approach is to leave out the informational no. With this approach, if the child gives an incorrect response, the therapist pauses a moment without giving reinforcement, but does not say no.
Thumbs up.
The therapist then begins another discrete trial
Thumbs up.
and prompts immediately after the SD is delivered.
There!
This is to ensure that the child gets the response correct. Let's watch the errorless learning correction one more time.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. There!
We have now reviewed the three components of the discrete trial: the SD itself, the prompt or waiting for a response, and reinforcement or correction. The remaining videos in this series will explore these and other topics in detail.
This is the second one that we do, and it is pretty much what ESAP does. It's in line with natural environment teaching. It's a net teaching, or we call it a pivotal response. Also, incidental teaching. It has all kinds of names. But it's an interaction that begins when the child initiates an interaction with the adult in a natural situation, and which is used to give the child an opportunity to practice a skill. Yes, Carl, come on in.
He was just going to take a bite.
Oh. When are you here till?
I'm going to go to the bathroom and then
Okay. You're going to lock the front, and then I'll lock this up
Yeah.
and set the alarm.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
Thanks, Vladimir.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Letting me off.
I accidentally called her Farrell yesterday because I was so tired when I left my girl. I'm like, whatever, I just walked out the door.
It started with a V. Some of the vowels were the same.
Farrell.
Oh, Farrell. I don't know her. I haven't met her.
She's a physical therapist.
I don't think I've met her.
Oh. Anyway, okay, so net or incidental
Pivotal
is
response.
pretty much what we do in ESAP. So the child leads the way, they pick what they want to play, and then we incorporate their goals into what they want.
When using incidental teaching during a lesson, there are several ways the student can respond to the teacher and the environment. In this video, we will look at three possible ways the student may respond and how the teacher should handle each situation.
How many? 8.
The goal of any teaching technique is for the student to perform independently. In this case, independence occurs when the student engages with the materials and uses language
Nice job asking.
without a cue or prompts from the teacher. Leah gives Brady attention and grants his request.
4.
Brady's performance is recorded as independent on the data sheet. This is the desired outcome of this lesson plan. On many occasions during the process of teaching this skill, the teacher has to prompt the student. Prompted responses occur when the student engages with the activity and demonstrates interest in something that the teacher can provide, but does not make a request. When the student starts playing with the toys alone or tries to reach for additional items, the teacher provides a prompt for the student to request the desired item using, in this case, a manual sign.
Nice job asking.
My turn.
As teaching progresses, the strength of the prompt is gradually reduced across opportunities. Here, all Leah had to do to have Brady request the toy was to deliver a light touch on his arm. The teacher then records the prompt that was used for the student to perform the response. There is yet another possible scenario when using incidental teaching. Regardless of how much effort the teacher places on preparing the environment properly to motivate the student to make a request, it may be the case that the student shows no interest for the items the teacher arranged. If the student ignores the materials, or even completes the activity without help or attention, then no response has occurred, and no teaching opportunity occurred. Nothing needs to be recorded in this case. The teacher should then attempt to rearrange the environment to motivate the student.
task analysis of chaining. So you're breaking a larger skill down into smaller steps or teachable units.
Chaining is another strategy that is often used to teach complex skills that involve a sequence of behaviors. Chaining involves breaking a larger skill down into its step-by-step components. Each step is taught and mastered, and then chained together into a larger whole. The description of the larger skill broken down into its sequence of steps is called a task analysis. Task analysis involves breaking a complex skill into smaller, teachable units, the products of which is a series of sequentially ordered steps or tasks. For example, take algebra. If you look at it as a whole, it looks daunting. However, if you break it down into its simplest parts, you may think, I can do this.
Okay, if you just take this and break it down into a couple of easy steps.
Bobby is overwhelmed with all the steps involved in tying his shoes. Bobby's older brother knows how to do it, and with chaining, he can teach Bobby to tie his shoes independently by taking the whole task and breaking it down into steps. First, he crosses the laces, slips one under, and pulls, then makes a loop, takes the other string and brings it around the loop, then pulls the string through the hole and pulls. As you can see, our task analysis of shoelace tying consists of a lot of steps. All of these steps need to be taught in order to achieve the final goal. But the task analysis of Bobby's brother may look different from another's task analysis. It's okay. You break down the skill into as many steps needed for the student to learn. Some steps can be chunked together for some students, and some students need skills broken down into very small steps. In this clip, we see David's therapist using backwards chaining to teach him to receptively identify 3 pictures. In the first trial, David is prompted to give lettuce and guitar, but independently gives the fire truck.
The guitar and the fire truck. Lettuce. Guitar. Fire truck! You got it! Okay.
In the second trial, he is only prompted to find the lettuce and independently finds the guitar and fire truck.
Give me the lettuce, the guitar, and the fire truck. That's the fire truck! Woo, woo, woo!
In the final trial, he independently finds and gives the therapist all 3 pictures.
All right, give me the lettuce, the guitar, and the fire truck.
I did.
You did it! Good!
Drawing is another time that backwards chaining can be used to teach children to draw each component of a picture. In this example, the therapist uses backwards chaining to teach Keenan to draw a smiley face.
Draw a smiley face.
What else?
Good job, buddy. Reason for you. Draw a smiley face. Nice job, Keenan. Come play with that. Draw a smiley face. Whoa, you're such a good artist. Here you go.
Our friend drew.
Because if you start from the, because if you start backwards, then they see what the finished thing's supposed to look like to begin with?
Right.
Okay.
That's why you do backwards with the shoelace so they can see what it's going to look like.
Okay, makes sense.
Discriminative teaching. Discrimination teaching. Aha, I didn't do it. Multiple examples. Multiple examples of correct and incorrect stimuli are presented to the student. So when we give them, 3 different pictures and we tell them to match, there are 2 obviously wrong answers and then 1 correct answer.
The other discrimination procedure is called random rotation, which is presenting two or more targets in random order and/or in random position.
Give me ball. Good job. Very nice, Ashley. Give me shoe. You did it! That was so great. All right, here we go. We gotta do nice sitting. Nice sitting. Good job. Give me car. You got it! That's the car.
In this example, the instructor targets ball on the first trial. The student gives the correct response. So the instructor rotates the positions of the materials and targets shoe on the second trial. Again, when the student gives the correct answer, the instructor rotates the positions and targets a different item, car, on the third trial.
It's for stimulus control, a process by which a new antecedent stimulus begins to evoke a response instead of a previous antecedent stimulus by using fading or delayed prompting. This will help explain that more because it's too wordy. The hair.
Welcome to the Autism Intervention Training video series. In this video, we will define and give some examples of different types of prompts. We will define prompt hierarchies and explain how to use them. We will also discuss the importance of systematically removing prompts. Let's begin by defining what a prompt is. Prompts are stimuli presented to ensure the occurrence of a response. In other words, prompts are cues that an instructor can use to make sure a child succeeds at a task. For example, when teaching a child to do a puzzle or put together Mr. Potato Head, the therapist can tap the correct space with a finger. This prompts the child to place the piece in the correct place. When teaching a child to brush his teeth, the therapist might physically guide the child's hands through the motions. This ensures that the child performs the correct actions.
Brush teeth.
The variety of prompts is almost endless. We will discuss the ones used most frequently. Let's begin with physical prompts. With physical prompts, the therapist physically moves the child to make the correct response. One common physical prompt is a hand-over-hand prompt. With hand-over-hand prompting, a therapist holds the child's hand and guides the child towards the correct response. For example, the therapist could guide the child's hand to show him how to put a lace through the correct hole or how to print a letter. Let's watch an example of a therapist using physical prompts.
Say scrub, scrub.
Another way to prompt a child is to model the correct response. With modeling, the therapist acts out the response. This ensures that the child observes the response being done correctly. For example, when teaching a child to play feed a doll, you could model feeding a bottle to the doll before asking the child to feed a bottle to the doll. Note in this example, the therapist also used some physical prompts. Here is an example of a therapist using a modeling prompt with block building.
I built a train. Can you make a train? Yeah.
something by my train. Get it in.
Wow, look at that train. Good job. Gestures are another type of prompt. Gestures include pointing towards, looking at, or otherwise gesturing to indicate a correct response. For example, when asking a child to touch the yellow card, you could tap the correct card.
Touch yellow. Oh, wow, good.
Visual prompts use visual information to give the child a clue about the correct response. For example, you might hold up a picture of a question mark to prompt the child to ask you a question.
There's bubbles in the room.
Note, the therapist held the picture of the question mark toward the camera so we could see it, but she would not normally present it in such an awkward manner. Positional prompts involve positioning the teaching material in a way that increases the chances that the child will respond correctly. For example, you could place the cue card with the correct response closer to the child than any of the other cards.
Keegan, give me all the animals.
Oh.
In this example, the therapist placed all the animals close to the child and all the other pictures on her side of the table. Last, verbal prompts refer to any vocal cues you may give to the child. There are many different types of verbal prompts. For example, you could use a direct echo prompt. While playing, you might say the words you want the child to say. Or when using questions, you might ask the child a question and then immediately say the correct answer. The child echoes you to get the correct answer. Here are some examples.
Chip. Eat.
Chip.
Good. Nice work. There you go.
Table first, then we can play. That's nice. Good boy. What's your name?
Tim.
Oh, what's your name? Carter.
Carter.
Good boy. What's your name?
Carter.
You got it. Nice work. What does a horse say? Neigh. That's it.
Now that we have reviewed some of the different types of prompts, we can discuss prompt hierarchies. A prompt hierarchy can help you decide what prompt to begin with when teaching a new skill. It is also useful for planning how to remove prompts as the child begins to acquire new skills.
Good.
A prompt hierarchy is a list of prompts for teaching a specific skill. The list begins with the prompts that provide the most help to the child and ends with the prompts that provide the least help to the child. Let's imagine you are going to teach a child how to brush his or her hair. First, you decide on an appropriate SD or instruction.
Brush hair.
My hands are gonna me.
Oh, good job brushing your hair, buddy. I liked it.
Next, you identify a sequence of prompts ranging from explicit support to minimal support of the behavior to be taught. The top of the hierarchy might be a physical hand-over-hand prompt where you guide the child's hand as he or she brushes his or her hair. The next level of the hierarchy might use a modeling prompt in which you give the SD and then begin brushing your own hair or a doll's hair.
Okay, Sophie, I want you to brush your hair.
Next, you might use a positional prompt in which you give the SD, place the hairbrush in an accessible position, and then point at the child's hair. A very minimal prompt would be a pause prompt, in which you simply wait for the child to brush following the SD. At the bottom of the hierarchy might be a contextual prompt, in which the child is shown a photograph of brushing in the context of a learned sequence, such as dressing. When beginning a new task, you want to start with the lowest level of prompt in the prompt hierarchy that the child requires to be successful on that task. For example, if the child can only brush his or her hair with a physical hand-over-hand prompt, you should begin with a physical prompt. If the child can complete the task with a visual, you should begin at this level of prompt, and so on. As the child acquires skills, you need to remove the prompts by moving down the prompt hierarchy. If not removed quickly, the child can become dependent on the prompt. Using the prompt hierarchy as a guide for removing prompts helps teach children to be able to succeed independently. The technical term for this process of moving down the prompt hierarchy and removing prompts is prompt fading. Let's watch a therapist demonstrate prompt fading.
Wow!
You want this? No. Okay. I'm coming. Touch cheeks. Whoa! 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 Touch cheeks. Love it. Want to play? Good. Okay. Touch ears. Whoa! It's all yours!
Notice in the last trial, the therapist held her hands at the ready, but no longer used the hand-over-hand prompt. There are two ways to fade prompts using the prompt hierarchy. The first way is to fade the intensity of the prompt within a level of the prompt hierarchy. The second way is to test or probe the child's competence at the next lower level of the prompt hierarchy. With both methods, the goal is to fade prompts as quickly as possible while ensuring maximum success. It would be great if children could be prompted with such accuracy and precision that they never gave an incorrect response. Of course, this goal is unattainable. However, we can try to minimize errors by fading prompts only when we think the child can succeed with a lower intensity or lower level prompt. To fade the intensity of a prompt within a level of the prompt hierarchy, we make it less and less noticeable. For example, when using hand-over-hand prompts, you can start to apply less pressure, gradually allowing the child to move his or her hand independently. You can fade a point prompt in a similar manner by gradually gesturing in smaller and less noticeable ways. Or you could fade a verbal prompt by giving less and less verbal instructions, or by only saying the first syllable of a correct response rather than the whole word. Once you have faded the intensity of a prompt and you believe that the child can succeed at the next level in the prompt hierarchy, you can probe the child's readiness. You do this by moving down one prompt level in your hierarchy and determining if the child is successful. If the child succeeds, you can stay at that lower level prompt and begin fading towards the next lower level in your hierarchy. If the child does not succeed, you go back up to the previous level of prompt where the child was successful and work towards fading the intensity again. First, we will watch an example of a therapist successfully probing a lower level prompt. Then, we will watch an example of a therapist probing a lower level prompt where the child fails and the therapist moves back up to the higher level of prompt.
Look, I made steps.
I made steps.
Can you make steps too?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, look, you made steps. Give me a high five.
More steps.
Look, I made steps.
I'm not gonna make steps.
Can you make steps too?
Yeah. Made steps.
Oh, that's very good, Keegan. Here's your trains. There you go.
Oh.
Look, I built steps. Can you build me some steps?
Yeah. On the block.
Oh, that's a good job. Here's your truck.
Let's get my truck. I got my truck today. Has a nice to say you.
Mm-hmm. Look, Keegan, I built steps.
What yours do I use?
Can you make me some steps?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Good job. Here you go. And let's build.
He's gonna go home. Truck's going home.
We have now defined what a prompt is and given examples of some of the more commonly used types of prompts. We discussed prompt hierarchies and demonstrated how they can be used to begin teaching a new task, as well as how they can be used for fading prompts. As we reach the end of this video, we must emphasize that fading prompts is one of the most important things you need to remember. It would be pointless to teach children to do things that they could only ever do if they were prompted. Therefore, from the very moment you begin using prompts, you should be thinking about how best to remove them.